Hello. See all your faces. My name is Campbell. I'm going to start here with an image of one of my paintings. It's sort of the end of a series which I loosely call my mandala paintings. And they evolved out of a kind of crisis I was having in terms of how I was representing kind of political imagery. So my work previous to this used kind of quite heavily loaded imagery that referenced slavery in particular. And I was finding that it very quickly, that's all people saw. Okay, a reference to slavery, we know what that means. And so the work itself became rather mute, and just sort of the meaning around it, the meanings of the people associated with those images kind of took the forefront. So what I began to do was take images that were associated with that time, or specifically with Jamaican colonial history, and embed them into patterns, and make these sort of kind of quite elaborate patterns out of them. This one is, the underlying image is a print from a Jamaican, very early Jamaican artist called Isaac Mendez Belisario. It's called Actor Boy, and it's an image of kind of a carnival-like character. It's a Jamaican celebration called John Canoe, and that would take place during Christmas time. And it was, I was kind of trying to reinvent this character as a sort of as a rebellious figure who, because this was a time of social disruption. It was a time when the slaves were allowed a certain degree of freedom, and you know, a number of the sort of major slave revolts took place around Christmas time. So I was associating these things together and kind of capturing this character of Actor Boy. I became increasingly fascinated with the character and eventually wanted to take him into real life, and moved quickly to this sort of performance character, which became loosely based on Actor Boy. Actor Boy, the print from Belisario was produced just immediately post-emancipation. So my envisioning of Actor Boy was this character who sort of straddled this period of emancipation. And in this formulation of him, instead of kind of being a character from the past, I was actually envisioning him as a character from kind of the possible future that existed at the time of emancipation, and that was coming back into the present. This is him in looking at cell phone prices in a shop in Kingston. So basically, he went around Kingston, a little bit in Trinidad as well, and did rather mundane activities, but in this sort of fantastical form, without any real explanation for people. This became sort of really important in my practice, not so much for the performances themselves, but the ideas which they spurred. So I kind of set myself the challenge of producing work as Actor Boy. And had actually a lot of problem doing that, disassociating myself from myself and producing as this character. So I eventually sort of collaborated with him, and we kind of came up with these objects, which kind of use the sort of symmetry and some of the same kind of representational strategies that I was using in the previous painting, where I would sort of take an image that was sort of very heavily loaded, often or almost always related to the sort of colonial history in Jamaica or transatlantic slavery, some slightly more poetic kind of interpretations as well, but then would kind of multiply them and tessellate them, and they would become patterns, but this time around a three-dimensional object. And so there's sort of tension between the sort of beauty of the object and the underlying image, and also a relationship to this sort of character of Actor Boy, who was he was kind of, as I say, I envisioned him as coming from a possible future, so I started looking at other kind of moments of possible futures, and kind of naturally came upon the work of Buckminster Fuller and his kind of utopian dome, so they kind of congealed in that way. This work became part of a show that was exhibited in a couple of places at Duke University and also in Victoria, BC. This painting kind of became a backdrop for that exhibition. It's a painting I call Bagasse, and it's a kind of stark image of the trash left over after sugarcane production. So kind of relating the sugar economy, which was one of the things that drove slavery, to these kind of utopian spheres, to this sort of abstract form. So there's sort of always this sort of consideration of this kind of chaotic beauty, and also this kind of political intent, which I try to not make. It's not about understanding a previous understanding of politics. It's about reinventing it. It's about trying to establish kind of new types of relationships. This is another version of those spheres. I started taking them out into the public sphere. This is on the streets in Trinidad. Again, I had a residency at Alice Yard a few years back, and this was the product of that residency. So these spheres, I just started taking them out into different types of public spaces. This one is on a promenade, which is kind of a downtown area of Port of Spain. There's a lot of activity. There's music going on. There's people selling stuff on the street. Very sort of lively environment. It also went to other environments that were sort of quieter and more gentrified. And the interesting thing that started to happen is that the way the public responded to it was very much in keeping with the sort of space that it was placed in. So it became less about the objects themselves, so that they came as a sort of this attractor within the spaces, but it seemed like they kind of find a focus for the community to perform itself around them. And I became getting really interested in that idea of interacting in public space. So this one again is in the promenade, and I actually had some drunk people come up and hug it. I had people dance around it. I had this little girl come up. I took it up to another place in front of a kind of posh hotel along the waterfront, and people stood up very nicely and had their pictures taken in front of it. Anyway, it was just a really interesting experience for me. This is the last slide I'm showing, and it's a kind of a further development of this kind of public work. Again, although you can't really see it, it's the images on, there are a set of images on each of those, the facets of that sort of sculptural overlay on the existing sculpture. So this existing sculpture isn't mine. It's a rather nostalgic, what do we say, piece in Victoria, kind of celebrating the return from war. And I've sort of turned the soldier into this kind of frightening machine in a way by overlaying these other images on. And there's a sense of the way trying to capture a public space, that there wasn't space in Victoria where I was living at the time for any kind of representation. There was no representation that was about me. I didn't seem to be allowed any room there. And it was like I wasn't going to wait for room to, I felt like this sort of immigrant communities and so on, they justify their existence by existing. They develop themselves. They don't have to wait for an invitation. So it was kind of with that idea in mind. It's like, okay, I don't have to do First Nations art. I don't have to do work that relates to this, or I don't have to do work that relates to that. I can do kind of whatever I want and claim the space for myself. And that is actually, I'm in the process of defining what a black artist does in this city, because it has not yet been defined. And I'm going to leave it there. I can say more, but